But he wouldn't accept her refusal and pushed her off a cliff. But before telling this story, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Continuing. The wind carried the scent of salt spray when Emily closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the warm breeze touch her face like a familiar caress. The sound of waves breaking against the rocks had been the soundtrack of her life since she was born in that small fishing village on the northern coast of California. There, between the sea and the mountains covered by redwood forests, time seemed to follow its own rhythm, oblivious to the bustling modern world that extended beyond those blue waters. Her delicate fingers ran along her simple cotton skirt, smoothing an imaginary crease while she gazed at the horizon. At 22, Emily carried a rare kind of beauty, not the kind that screams for attention, but the kind that whispers ancestral secrets. Her black hair, always meticulously braided, framed a face with delicate features that rarely wore makeup. Her eyes, a deep brown that sometimes appeared golden in sunlight, held a wisdom that went beyond her years. In the small wooden house painted light blue, her mother, Ruth, worked at an old sewing machine, its rhythmic sound blending with the sounds of the sea. The smell of homemade bread still lingered in the air. It was Saturday, the day her mother always made extra loaves to sell at the next day's market. Her father, George, must have been at the pier, mending nets with the other fishermen, preparing for another week of work at sea. That simple life had its own richness, one that Emily had learned to value from an early age, not by imposition, but through a deep understanding that there was beauty in simplicity, strength in humility. With a teaching degree from the nearest state college, an achievement that filled her parents with pride, she now taught at the village's only school, transforming dreams into possibilities for other children who, like her, were born between the sea and the mountains. The sun was beginning to set when she noticed unusual activity at the harbor. Luxury cars, rarely seen around there, were parking near the old pier. Men in suits, out of place in that setting of fishing, nets and weathered boats, carried briefcases and spoke in serious tones. The sight caused a tightness in her chest. In recent months, rumors about land sales and major developments had been disturbing the village's peace. That's when she saw him for the first time. Tall with a natural authority in his bearing, Nathan Stone stepped out of the last car, a black Range Rover that gleamed like an oil slick on crystalline water. Even from a distance, it was impossible not to notice his magnetic presence. The impeccably cut Italian suit couldn't completely hide a wilder nature, something primitive that seemed to pulse beneath the polished surface. Emily felt an involuntary shiver run down her spine. There was something about him that deeply disturbed her. Perhaps it was the way his dark eyes seemed to devour everything around him, as if the world were his by natural right. Or maybe it was the way he moved, with a predatory grace that reminded her of the great mountain lions that sometimes came down from the hills on moonlit nights. A few meters away, Nathan felt the weight of the humid air in his lungs, accustomed to the air-conditioned offices in skyscrapers. At 35, he had built an empire on the already solid foundations left by his father and grandfather. The Stones were known for transforming landscapes into profit, dreams into numbers, and Nathan was the most relentless of them all. Not out of cruelty, but from an almost religious conviction that progress had its price, and someone needed to be willing to collect it. His eyes scanned the village with a mixture of disdain and fascination. This place was an anachronism, a bubble of frozen time that needed to be burst. The resort project was practically approved. Only a few details remained, some signatures, some consciences to be bought. Nothing that a few more zeros couldn't resolve. That's when his gaze found Emily. Time seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if even the most basic elements of the universe could feel the weight of that encounter. Nathan felt something move inside him, something that had long been dormant under layers of cynicism and power. The delicate figure on the hilltop, with black hair dancing in the wind and a simple dress molding modest curves, seemed to have been painted there by some particularly cruel artist, like a personalized temptation. "Who is that?" he asked his assistant, without taking his eyes off the female figure. "Emily Sanders, sir, teacher at the local school, daughter of George Sanders, one of the most respected fishermen in the village." Nathan nodded slightly, storing each detail. like someone memorizing the coordinates of a newly discovered treasure. There was something about her that intrigued him, not just her obvious beauty, but a kind of inner light that seemed to shine through her skin like a beacon on a stormy night. The wind changed direction, bringing with it the distant scent of jasmine, the same that Emily usually wore, a simple essence bought at the craft fair. For a moment their gazes met across the distance, and both felt the weight of that moment, as if fate were weaving its invisible threads around them. Emily was the first to look away, feeling her cheeks burn. There was something about that man that frightened and attracted her in equal measure. It was as if he carried with him a promise of a storm, beautiful, powerful, and potentially devastating. Nathan continued observing her for a few more moments, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. In his mind he was already tracing strategies as he always did, but for the first time in a long time he felt that perhaps he wasn't in complete control of the situation. There was something about that woman, that village, that moment that escaped his usual understanding of the world. The sun finally set, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple that reflected in the calm waters of the bay. The first stars began to appear, timidly, in the darkening sky. In the blue wooden house, Ruth called Emily inside, her voice carrying the maternal concern of always. At the harbour, Nathan entered his luxury car, but his thoughts remained fixed on the delicate figure he had seen on the hilltop. That night, while the village slept its usual peaceful sleep, two souls remained awake, each in their own world, separated by much more than just physical distance. Emily, in her simple room, tried to understand the whirlwind of emotions that brief exchange of glances had awakened. Nathan, in his presidential suite at the best hotel in the nearest town, planned his next move, like the strategist he had always been. Fate had cast its dice, and now all that remained was to wait and see how that game would unfold. A game where the stakes were much higher than either of them could imagine at that moment. A game where hearts, souls, and lives were at risk, and where the traditional rules of power and money might not be enough to determine the winner. Satue. Morning arrived with a fine mist covering the village like a bridal veil. Emily woke up early, as always, but something was different. Her dreams had been populated by dark eyes and an enigmatic smile that had pursued her until dawn. She shook her head, trying to push away those thoughts as she prepared for another day of teaching. The small municipal school was a few minutes' walk from her house. The simple building, painted faded yellow, housed 4 classrooms and a modest courtyard where children played during breaks. There Emily found her purpose, transforming lives through education, just as her own life had been transformed. But that morning, her thoughts insisted on flying far from the classroom. Between mathematics explanations and Portuguese exercises, the image of Nathan Stone infiltrated her mind like water through the cracks of a window during a storm. There was something disturbing about the way he had looked at her, as if he could see through her, as if he already knew her from some previous life. During the break, while watching her students play, Emily heard worried conversations among the other teachers. The resort project was advancing faster than everyone had imagined. Some families had already sold their lands, seduced by promises of easy money and a better life elsewhere. "They say they're going to build right there, where the old cemetery is," commented Mary, the history teacher, pointing to an area further, away from the village. "That place is sacred to our people. The ancestors of the fishermen have been buried there for generations." Emily's heart tightened. That piece of land wasn't just a plot. It was the living history of her people, the place where those who came before rested, those who had built that community with sweat and hope. How could someone simply steamroll over that in the name of progress? Her father had mentioned during breakfast that there would be a meeting at the community center that evening. The businessmen wanted to present the project to the community, try to win the support of the more resistant residents. George Sanders, with his simple wisdom as a man of the sea, knew it was just a formality. The important decisions had already been made in luxury offices far from there. The day dragged on with torturous slowness. When the school bell finally rang announcing the end of classes, Emily found herself torn between the desire to flee home and the curiosity that pushed her toward the community center. She opted to go home first, change clothes and help her mother with dinner, before facing whatever the night held in store. Ruth noticed her daughter's restlessness as they prepared fish soup together. "Something worries you, my daughter?" Emily hesitated, her hands pausing for a moment over the carrot she was cutting. How could she explain to her mother something she didn't understand herself? How could she put into words that sensation of standing at the edge of a precipice, about to fall towards something unknown and potentially dangerous? "It's just this resort business, Mum. I'm afraid of what will happen to our village, to my students' families." Her mother observed her with that look that seemed to see beyond the spoken words. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the biggest storms bring the most necessary changes. The important thing is to keep your feet firmly on the ground and your heart open to what God determines." The community center was packed when Emily arrived with her parents. The air was heavy with the heat of crowded bodies and the tension of expectations. On a small improvised stage, a screen projected images of the future resort, a luxurious complex of white buildings and infinity pools that seemed completely alien to that familiar landscape. That's when he entered. Nathan Stone crossed the hall as if he owned it, and perhaps he already did in a way. He wore a navy blue suit that must have cost more than a fisherman's yearly salary, but there was something different about him today. His eyes scanned the crowd until they found Emily's, and for a moment she swore she saw a flash of something, vulnerability, pass across that marble-carved face. The presentation began with grandiose promises: jobs, development, progress. Nathan spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to molding reality according to his will. His voice was hypnotic, with only the slightest hint of his New York accent in his otherwise perfect speech. But it was his words about the cemetery that made Emily stand up. "With all due respect, Mr. Stone," her voice trembled slightly but gained strength as she spoke, "that land is not just a piece of earth. It's where our ancestors rest, where our history is buried. How can you talk about progress when you intend to build on the bones of our memory?" The silence that followed was as dense as fog. Nathan stared at her with an intensity that made her heart race. For a moment it seemed he would become furious at the interruption, but then his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Sanders, isn't it? I understand your concern. Perhaps we could discuss this more privately? I'm sure we can reach an agreement that benefits everyone." There was something in his tone that made Emily shudder, not from fear but from an emotion she couldn't name. She felt the community's eyes on her, some worried, others curious. Her father shifted uncomfortably in the chair beside her. "There's nothing to discuss privately, Mr. Stone. What I have to say, I can say in front of everyone." His smile widened, now with a touch of genuine amusement. "Your passion is admirable, Miss Sanders. But the world doesn't stop because of sentimentality. Progress is inevitable. Progress without respect isn't progress, Mr. Stone. It's just destruction by another name." The words hung in the air like the harbinger of a storm, Nathan observed, her with an enigmatic expression, as if revising all his carefully drawn plans. There was something about that young teacher that intrigued and challenged him, something that went beyond her natural beauty or the courage to confront him publicly. The meeting continued, but something had changed. The tension between them was almost palpable, charged with unspoken meanings and dangerous possibilities. When it finally ended, Emily left quickly, needing the fresh night air to clear her thoughts. But before she could reach the street, she felt a firm hand grasp her. "I'm talk, Miss Sanders." Nathan's voice was low, almost a whisper, but loaded with authority. "You shouldn't run off like that. We still have much to discuss." Emily turned to face him, conscious of the proximity between their bodies, of the heat emanating from him, of the masculine cologne that enveloped her. "There's nothing to discuss, Mr. Stone. You've made your position clear, and I've made mine clear." Sometimes first impressions can be deceiving. His fingers slid gently over her arm before releasing it. "Perhaps I need someone to show me another perspective on this village and its people." The veiled invitation in his words was clear as water. Emily felt her heart accelerate, torn between the magnetic attraction that man exerted over her and everything he represented, the threat to her community, the disrespect to their traditions. "Good night, Mr. Stone," she managed to say, quickly moving away before her resolution weakened. As she walked home under the starry sky, Emily knew something fundamental had changed in her life. The confrontation at the community center was just the beginning of a greater battle, not just for the preservation of her village, but also for her own heart. The days that followed brought a new routine to the village. The constant presence of men in suits, the endless meetings, the rumors that ran from door to door like the wind, all this created an atmosphere of inevitable change. But for Emily, the biggest change was inside her. In the way, her heart insisted on accelerating every time a certain black Range Rover crossed her path. Nathan had established himself temporarily in the village, occupying the only local inn that offered any comfort. His presence was like a shadow that extended over the community, altering behaviors, awakening fears and hopes. Some families were already openly negotiating the sale of their properties, seduced by the astronomical values offered. Others resisted, clinging to tradition like shipwrecked sailors to a life-saving board. That Thursday morning, as she walked to school, Emily was surprised by an unusual scene. Nathan was standing near the gate, apparently absorbed in contemplation of the simple building. He wore more casual clothes, a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark pants, but still appeared no less imposing. "Good morning, Miss Sanders." His voice had that velvety tone that made something tremble inside her. "I hope I'm not delaying your class." "The children don't arrive for half an hour," she responded, trying to keep her voice firm. "What are you doing here, Mr. Stone?" "Nathan, please, and I'm here to make a proposal." He approached, reducing the distance between them in a way that made the air seem denser. "I want to better understand this community, and who better to show me its essence than the local teacher?" Emily caught his cologne, something expensive and masculine that contrasted with the smell of sea salt in the air. "If you want to understand our community, why not start by respecting our dead?" An enigmatic smile played on his lips. "And if I said I'm willing to reconsider the cemetery issue, that maybe we could find a solution that satisfies everyone?" Her heart skipped a beat. "And what would be the price of that reconsideration?" "Your time," he answered simply. "1 hour a day for a week. Show me your village through your eyes. Help me see what you see." It was a dangerous proposal, and Emily knew it. Spending time with Nathan meant lowering her defenses, risking being seduced not just by his charm but also by his promises. However, if there was a chance to save the cemetery, to preserve something sacred for her people— 1 hour a day, she finally agreed. "But no private meetings in offices or hotels. We'll meet in public places, where everyone can see us." His smile widened, revealing perfectly white teeth. "Agreed. We start today after your classes." Emily nodded, already wondering if she had just made a deal with the devil. Nathan walked away with that feline elegance that characterized him, leaving her with a sensation of vertigo and a racing heart. The school day passed like a blur. Her students must have noticed her distraction, but were kind enough not to comment. When the last bell rang, Emily found Nathan waiting in the same place as the morning, now casually leaning against his luxury car with a studied casualness. "Where do we go first, Miss Sanders?" "To the cemetery," she replied without hesitation. "If we're going to do this, we'll start with the heart of the matter." The path to the old cemetery was steep and irregular, certainly not made for expensive Italian shoes. But Nathan followed her without complaint, observing with genuine interest or very well feigned, as she pointed out the ancient tombstones, told stories of brave fishermen who had built the village, of strong women who had kept families together through literal and metaphorical storms. "See that tombstone over there?" She pointed to a wooden cross weathered by time. "It's my grandfather's. He died at sea during a storm, saving 3 young fishermen who had ventured too far from the coast. His body was never found, but his spirit rests here, along with all the others who made this village what it is today." Nathan remained silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the small cemetery with an impossible-to-decipher expression. "You speak of this place as if each stone holds a story. And doesn't it? Aren't stories what make us who we are, what connect us to each other across time?" He turned to face her, and there was something different in his look, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Do you know why I build, Emily? Because building is the only way I know to leave my own mark, my own story." The sudden intimacy of using her first name caught her off guard. "There are other ways to leave marks, Nathan. Ways that don't involve destroying the marks left by others." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reflected on the marble tombstones. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it the perfume of wildflowers that grew between the graves. For a moment, time seemed to suspend its course, and they were just a man and a woman, standing between past and future, between the sacred and the profane. "Maybe," Nathan finally said, his voice softer than normal, "I need to learn those other ways." The moment was broken by the distant sound of the church bell announcing the Ave Maria hour. Emily moved away, suddenly conscious of how close they had been. "Our hour is over," she said, trying to recover her composure. "Tomorrow I can show you the harbor if you'd like." Nathan nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on her with a disturbing intensity. "You know this doesn't change anything, right? The resort will still be built. But perhaps it will change how it's built," she responded, beginning to descend the hill. "And sometimes, Nathan, that's all we can hope for. Small changes that make big differences." As she walked back home, Emily felt the weight of his gaze on her back. She knew she was playing with fire, that each minute spent in Nathan Stone's company was a risk, not just for her heart but for everything she believed in. However, there was something about him, something beyond the facade of the relentless businessman, that intrigued and attracted her like a moth to flame. What she didn't know was that, at that same moment, Nathan remained at the top of the hill, watching her delicate figure disappear among the simple houses of the village. For the first time in a long time, he felt destabilized, as if the ground beneath his feet was no longer as solid as it used to be. That young teacher, with her passion for tradition and her quiet strength, had achieved something no one had ever achieved, making him question not just his plans, but also the person he had become. Nathan moved closer, until only inches separated them under the umbrella. The rain was falling harder now, creating a liquid curtain that seemed to isolate them from the rest of the world. His dark eyes studied Emily's face with an intensity that made her heart race. "And what if I wanted you to show me that path?" His voice was low, almost a whisper that blended with the sound of the rain. "What if I told you something about you makes me question everything I've always believed?" Emily felt her breath falter. His proximity was intoxicating, dangerous. "Nathan, A distant thunder cut through the moment, making her instinctively step back. Reality returned with full force. She was the village teacher, the fisherman's daughter, and he was the man threatening to destroy everything her community held sacred. "It's getting too strong," she said, referring to the rain, but knowing she spoke of much more. "We should seek shelter." Nathan nodded, but his eyes didn't leave her face. "Is there a cafe nearby?" "Mrs. Wilson's, on the corner. She makes the best sweet potato pie in the region." They walked quickly to the small establishment, a simple but welcoming place, with checkered tablecloths and the comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee. Mrs. Wilson, a grey-haired lady with a maternal smile, greeted them with barely disguised curiosity. "2 coffees and 2 slices of your special pie, please," Emily ordered, trying to act naturally while feeling the gazes of the few present customers. They sat at a table in the back, where the yellowish light created an almost intimate atmosphere. Nathan removed his wet jacket, revealing a white shirt that molded to his broad shoulders in a way Emily tried not to notice. "Tell me about yourself," he asked, surprising her. "How does an intelligent young woman like you choose to stay here when you could have sought greater opportunities?" "You speak as if staying were a lesser choice," she replied, accepting the coffee cup Mrs. Wilson brought. "But sometimes the greatest opportunities are exactly where we were born. Each child I teach is a chance to change the future, to keep our traditions alive while building new dreams." Nathan watched her with an expression that mixed fascination and something close to envy. "It must be comforting to have such certainty about your place in the world. And you? Have you never questioned your path?" A bitter smile touched his lips. Questioning wasn't an option in the Stone family. My grandfather built an empire from nothing. My father expanded it, and I was born with a destiny already mapped out. There was a loneliness in his words that touched something inside. Emily. For the first time, she saw Nathan not as the antagonist in her story, but as someone as trapped as she was, albeit by different chains. "But now you're questioning," she said softly. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, all the barriers between them, social, ideological, emotional, seemed to melt like mist under the morning sun. "You make me question many things, Emily Sanders." The sound of her name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. It was dangerous, this territory between duty and desire, between loyalty and attraction. But something bigger was at stake, not just the fate of the village, but perhaps Nathan Stone's very soul. The rain continued outside, turning the dirt roads into small rivers that ran toward the sea. Inside the cafe, time seemed suspended, creating a small universe where a teacher and a businessman could just be a man and a woman sharing coffee and stories. "You know what I miss most?" Nathan continued, his voice carrying unexpected nostalgia. "The smell of my grandmother's apple pie on Sundays. She refused to leave her small town in Vermont, lived in a little village not much different from this one. I spent summers with her as a child, before being sent to the best boarding schools money could buy." Emily could visualize the scene. Small Nathan running through stone-paved alleys, free from the expectations and the weight of the name he carried. "And do you still visit her?" A shadow passed over his face. "She passed away a few years ago. The village where she lived was transformed into a resort. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Sometimes I wonder what she would think of me now." "It's never too late to honor someone's memory by making different choices," Emily said, placing her hand over his in an impulse that surprised them both. The touch, though brief, sent an electric current through them. Nathan turned his hand, his fingers entwining with hers for a precious moment before Emily pulled back, conscious of the gazes around them. "Our hour is ending," she said, noticing the sky beginning to darken outside. "Tomorrow?" he asked, and there was an urgency in his voice that wasn't there before. "Tomorrow," Emily agreed, standing up. "There's a festival in the village, the celebration of St. Peter. Perhaps you should come, see our community at its most authentic." Nathan also stood, putting on his still damp jacket. "I'll be there." When they left the cafe, the rain had transformed into a gentle drizzle. Nathan insisted on accompanying her home, and they walked side by side under the umbrella, each lost in their own thoughts and the acute awareness of the other's presence. At her door, Emily hesitated. "What happened today doesn't change anything, does it?" Nathan studied her for a long moment, his face a mask of contradictory emotions. "Maybe it changes everything, Emily. Maybe it already has." He leaned in, and for a terrifying and wonderful moment she thought he would kiss her. Instead, his lips brushed her forehead in a gesture so gentle it could have been imagined. "Until tomorrow," he murmured, moving away before she could respond. Emily remained on the porch long after Nathan's elegant figure disappeared into the rainy night. Her heart was in turmoil, divided between the undeniable attraction she felt for him and the fear of betraying her community simply by allowing these feelings to exist. Inside the house, she found her parents in the kitchen. Her father was cleaning, fishing nets while her mother prepared dinner. The familiar scene, which had always brought her comfort, now seemed charged with new meaning, new responsibility. "I saw you with the businessman," her father commented without raising his eyes from his work. There was no accusation in his voice, just deep concern. "Be careful, daughter. There are different types of storms, and not all come from the sea." Emily kissed the top of her father's head, feeling unshed tears burn in her eyes. "I know, Dad. I know." That night, lying in her simple bed, Emily thought about Nathan, about his sad eyes when he spoke of his grandmother, about the warmth of his hand against hers, about the unexpected softness of his lips on her forehead. She thought about the village, the children she taught, the sacred cemetery she was trying to protect. The rain continued outside, a gentle melody against the tiles, as if the very sky shared her confusion. Tomorrow would be the festival of St. Peter, a celebration of faith, tradition, and community, and Nathan would be there, bringing with him all the promises and dangers his world represented. Before sleeping, Emily made a silent prayer, asking not for answers but for strength to follow her heart without betraying her roots, to believe that sometimes love could be greater than differences, that it could transform without destroying. The Fas, day of the St. Peter's Festival, dawned with a surprisingly clear sky after the previous day's rain. The entire village had been bustling since early morning. Colourful banners crossed the dirt roads. The smell of typical treats hung in the air, and the church had been decorated with flowers and blue and white ribbons, the colours of the fishermen. Emily woke to the sound of distant music. The fishermen were already beginning their preparations for the maritime procession that would happen at dusk. She dressed with special care that morning, choosing a light blue dress her mother had sewn for the occasion. Her hair, normally confined in a severe braid, today fell loose down her back, only partially held by a ribbon that matched her dress. "You look beautiful, daughter," said Ruth, observing her with misty eyes. "You look like your grandmother when she was young." The comment made her smile. Her maternal grandmother had been a legendary figure in the village, known for both her beauty and her strength of spirit. She had only vague memories of her, but all involved her warm smile and the smell of herbs that always accompanied her. The morning was dedicated to final preparations. Emily helped organize the fair, decorated the central square with her students, and rehearsed with the church choir one last time. But behind each activity, there was a growing expectation that had nothing to do with the festivities, the promise of Nathan's presence. He appeared when the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The maritime procession was about to begin, and the entire village gathered at the harbour. Nathan stood out in the crowd, not only for his height and elegant bearing, but for something more, an aura of displacement, as if he were a word in a foreign language amid a text in English. His eyes found hers immediately, as if they had an internal radar tuned to each other. He had made an effort to dress more casually, dark pants and a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, but still looked strangely formal among the fishermen in their simple festival clothes. "You came," Emily said when he approached, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "I promised I would," he replied, his eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her blush. "You look stunning." Before she could respond, the sound of fireworks announced the beginning of the procession. The boats, all decorated with flowers and flags, began to move away from the harbour in a coordinated dance over the waters. The image of St. Peter, carried on the main boat, gleamed under the last rays of the sun. "Come." Emily took Nathan's hand without thinking, guiding him to a higher point of the harbour where they could better see the procession. "The view is more beautiful from here." They stood side by side, their hands still joined, observing the spectacle. The boats formed a perfect circle on the water, their lights reflecting on the calm surface like fallen stars. The church choir, positioned on a larger boat, began to sing traditional hymns that echoed over the waters. "It's magical," murmured Nathan, and there was a sincerity in his voice that surprised her. "It's our way of giving thanks," explained Emily, conscious of the warmth of his hand against hers. "For the sea that feeds us, for the life we've been given, for the community we've built together." Nathan looked at her then, and there was something different in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "How do you do this, Emily? How do you make me see beauty in things that before I only saw as obstacles to be removed?" The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She turned to face him completely, aware that several gazes from the community were on them, but unable to care at that moment. "Maybe you've always been capable of seeing that beauty, Nathan. Maybe you just needed someone to remind you to look with your heart, not just with the eyes of business." He brought a hand to her face, his fingers tracing a gentle line on her cheek. "And what if my heart is seeing things that could complicate everything?" The moment was interrupted by a new explosion of fireworks, closer this time. The colors reflected in Nathan's eyes, red, blue, gold, creating a kaleidoscope of emotions that Emily could barely process. The festival continued into the night. There was music, dancing, traditional food served in improvised stalls. Nathan remained by Emily's side, observing everything with seemingly genuine interest. She introduced him to some residents, translating not just words, but also cultures, building bridges over the abyss that separated their worlds. "Try this," she said, offering him a piece of sweet potato pie. "It's Mrs. Wilson's secret recipe." Nathan accepted the dessert, his fingers brushing hers in the process. "Delicious," he declared after tasting it. "It reminds me a little of the pie my grandmother used to make. Different, but equally comforting." As the night progressed, the music became slower, more romantic. Couples began to dance on the improvised square, and Nathan extended a hand to Emily. "May I have this dance?" She hesitated for a moment, conscious of the gazes around, of the implications, of the boundaries they were about to cross. But there was something in the way he looked at her, a mixture of hope and vulnerability, that made her accept. They danced under the stars, their bodies close enough to share warmth, but still maintaining a respectful distance. The music, and Pew, old American love song, spoke of intertwined destinies and hearts that meet against all odds. "Tomorrow," Nathan whispered in her ear, "I want to show you something, an alternative I've been considering for the resort." Emily pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "What kind of alternative?" "One that might preserve what's important to your community, and still bring the development we promised. But I need your opinion, your guidance." Her heart accelerated with the possibility implicit in his words. "Are you really considering changing the plans?" Nathan held her a little more firmly, as if afraid she might disappear. "I'm considering changing much more than just the plans, Emily." The music ended, but they remained for a moment on the improvised dance floor, trapped in a bubble where the rest of the world seemed distant and nebulous. It was Emily who finally took a step back, conscious of the community's gazes, of the weight of expectations and responsibilities. "Tomorrow, then," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Nathan nodded, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture that would seem antiquated coming from anyone else, but which in him carried a natural elegance. "Tomorrow." As she watched him leave, Emily felt something moving inside her, a dangerous hope, a forbidden desire, a possibility that until then had seemed impossible. The festival continued around her, but she barely noticed, lost in thoughts about tomorrow, and all the promises it carried. In the church, the bells rang announcing midnight, and Emily made a new prayer, this time not just for strength, but also for wisdom. Because for the first time since this whole story began, she glimpsed the possibility of an ending, where she wouldn't have to choose between her heart and her community, an ending where love and tradition could coexist, where progress didn't mean destruction, where different worlds could meet and transform each other. The morning brought with it a soft mist that covered the village like a bridal veil, transforming familiar shapes into mysterious silhouettes. Emily woke before sunrise, her body vibrating with a nervous energy that made it impossible to remain in bed. She dressed with deliberate care, a long navy blue skirt and a simple but elegant white blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose bun that left a few strands framing her face. Nathan's note had arrived the previous evening, brought by his driver. "Meet me at the lookout at 7 a.m. I want to show you the future." The message, written in his elegant handwriting, had kept Emily awake for hours, imagining what he might have planned. The lookout was the highest point in the village, a natural plateau from which one could see the entire bay, and on clear days even the distant islands that dotted the horizon. It was also, ironically, the location originally chosen for the construction of the main tower of the resort. Nathan was already there when she arrived, leaning against his car with a folder of documents in his hands. He wore a light grey suit that made him appear even taller and more imposing against the morning sky. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and a genuine smile replaced his tense expression. "You came," he said, as if he had doubted it. "You said that yesterday too," she responded, trying to keep her voice light, despite the nervousness that made her heart beat faster. Nathan opened the folder he carried, revealing plans and drawings. "Before showing this to anyone else, I want your opinion. I spent all night working on this. Well, actually, I've been thinking about this since our first conversation in the cemetery." Emily moved closer to examine the documents, and her breath caught. The plans showed a completely different project from the original. Instead of apartment, towers and a massive hotel complex, there were smaller structures, integrated into the natural landscape. The cemetery wasn't just preserved, but transformed into a memorial garden surrounded by a conservation area. "The concept is different," explained Nathan, his voice gaining enthusiasm as he pointed out the details. "Instead of a traditional resort, I propose an eco-resort. Sustainable cottages built with local materials, ecological trails, a marine research center in partnership with universities. The local fishermen would be incorporated into the project, offering traditional tours, sharing their knowledge of the sea." Emily studied the drawings with unshed tears blurring her vision. And the cemetery? It would be the spiritual heart of the project, a sacred space where visitors could learn about the village's history, about the traditions that made this place what it is. He paused, observing her reaction. "What do you think?" She raised her eyes from the documents to face him. "Why? Why this change?" Nathan took a step toward her, reducing the distance between them until she could feel the heat emanating from his body. "Because you made me see that there are different types of wealth, different forms of progress. Because for the first time in my life, I want to build something that not only generates profit, but also preserves soul." "And your investors? The board?" "I've already done the calculations. With the ecotourism concept on the rise, we might even have a greater return in the long term." "It will be more laborious, it will take longer, but—" He hesitated, his eyes fixed on hers. "Some things are worth the wait." The double meaning in his words wasn't lost on her. Emily felt her heart accelerate even more, if that was possible. "Nathan, don't say anything yet," he gently interrupted. "There's one more thing I need to show you." He turned to the car and withdrew a second folder, this one thinner. Inside were legal documents that Emily didn't fully understand, but one phrase jumped out at her. "Transfer of property. What is this?" "The land where the cemetery is," explained Nathan. "I'm transferring its ownership to a community foundation that will be administered by the village residents. Regardless of what happens with the resort project, that sacred space will remain protected." Emily felt her legs weaken. It was too much, the new project, the protection of the cemetery, the complete change in everything Nathan represented. "Why are you doing this?" He brought a hand to her face, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. "Because for the first time in my life, I've found something that money can't buy, something that makes me want to be a better person." The sun finally broke through the mist, bathing the lookout in a golden light that seemed to bless that moment. Nathan leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. But Emily didn't pull back. Her heart, her mind, and her soul seemed finally in harmony, guiding her forward toward him. When their lips met, it was as if all the tensions, all the doubts, all the barriers between their worlds dissolved. The kiss was soft initially, almost reverent, like a shared prayer. But soon it deepened, carrying with it months of repressed desire, of denied feelings, of only dreamed possibilities. Nathan's hands enveloped her waist, pulling her closer, while hers found their way to the nape of his neck, her fingers entwining in his dark hair. The world around disappeared. There was no more village, no resort, no past or future. Only that moment, that kiss, that silent promise that sometimes love can truly transform everything. When they finally separated, breathless, Nathan rested, his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if trying to memorize every sensation. "I know it's too soon to say certain words," he murmured, "but I need you to know that you've changed my life, Emily Sanders. Changed my heart." She smiled, feeling tears of happiness escape her eyes. "You've changed mine too, Nathan Stone. Made me believe that sometimes the greatest changes begin with a single gesture of love." The sun continued to rise in the sky, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. Below them, the village was beginning to wake, Fishermen preparing their boats, children on their way to school, life following its eternal course. But now there was something new in the air, something that spoke of possibilities, of transformation, of a future where tradition and progress could dance together like the sea and the wind. Nathan held Emily's face between his hands, his eyes overflowing with emotion. Will we build this future together? Not just the resort, but everything? Her answer was another kiss, deeper than the first, carrying with it all the promises that words couldn't express. Because sometimes love isn't just about finding someone who completes your world. It's about finding someone who expands it, who transforms it, who makes it larger and more beautiful than you ever imagined it could be. When Nathan learned of Vittorio's visit, his reaction was a mixture of fury and concern. "They're desperate," he said, pacing back and forth in his improvised office at the inn. "The board knows that if this project succeeds, others will follow the example. It's a paradigm shift that they fear." Emily observed him from the armchair where she sat, admiring how even when agitated, he maintained a natural elegance in his movements. "And what can we expect now?" "War," he answered, finally stopping to face her. "They'll try everything. Financial, pressure, legal threats, maybe even trying to smear my reputation in the media. But I have a trump card they didn't expect." "And what would that be?" An enigmatic smile appeared on his lips. "My grandmother wasn't just the sweet grandma who made apple pie on Sundays. She was also a very intelligent woman who foresaw that something like this might happen one day." Nathan walked to the safe embedded in the wall, typed a combination, and removed an old folder. "When she passed away, she left me a letter and these documents. They're company shares, converted in her name before her death. Shares enough to, added to mine, give me majority control of the corporation." Emily stood up, approaching to examine the documents. "Why have you never used this before?" "Because I never had a reason strong enough to face this battle." He held her face between his hands. "Until now." The following days were tense. As predicted, the board began an aggressive campaign against the changes. Reports began to appear in financial newspapers questioning Nathan's mental health, insinuating that he was being manipulated by a cunning local girl. The words made Emily's blood boil. But the village closed around them like a fortress. When reporters began to appear looking for sensational stories, they found closed doors and silence. The community, which before viewed Nathan with suspicion, now protected him as one of their own. It was Ruth who first noticed the change in Nathan. "He smiles more now," she commented one afternoon, while observing through the kitchen window the businessman helping some fishermen carry nets. "Smiles like someone who has finally found his place in the world." It was true. Gradually, Nathan was transforming. His expensive clothes still distinguished him, but there was now a softness in his gestures, a capacity to truly listen to people that hadn't existed before. He spent hours with the fishermen, learning about their techniques, their stories, their ancestral knowledge of the sea. One afternoon, as they walked along the beach, Nathan surprised Emily with a confession. "You know what I miss most about my grandmother? The way she used to say that true wealth isn't kept in safes. And where is it kept? In people's hearts, in the land that sustains us, in the sea that teaches us about change and permanence." He stopped, turning to face her. "You taught me the same lesson, you know, just in a different way." Emily smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "And what way would that be?" "By making me see that sometimes we need to lose everything we thought we were to find who we really are." The moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the sand. It was Sam, one of the youngest fishermen in the village, running in their direction with an urgent expression. "Nathan, Emily, you need to see this." They followed Sam to the harbor, where a group of people gathered around a laptop. On the screen, a live report showed the Stone Corporation building in San Francisco. Vittorio Coleman was being escorted out by federal officers. "Tax fraud," explained Sam, who besides being a fisherman had a degree in accounting. "Here it seems someone leaked documents proving a scheme of overcharging in other company projects." Nathan observed the scene with a complex expression. There was no triumph on his face, just a kind of resigned sadness. "It was inevitable," he murmured. They dug their own grave with so much greed. That night there was an emergency meeting at the community center. The scandal involving Coleman had created a unique opportunity. With the board destabilized, Nathan could finally use his shares to take full control of the company. "But this means I'll need to spend a few weeks in San Francisco," he explained to the gathered community. "I need to be there personally to ensure the transition is smooth and that our project here isn't affected." His eyes found Emily's among the crowd. There was a silent question in them, an unverbalized invitation. She felt her heart accelerate, understanding what he was really asking. After the meeting, they met at the lookout, their special place. The full moon bathed everything in a silvery light that made the moment almost magical. "Come with me," said Nathan, holding her hands. "Not just to San Francisco now, but forever. Marry me, Emily." The proposal caught her by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. The entire path they had traveled together seemed to lead to this moment. "But the school? The children? We can return whenever you want. In fact," he hesitated, as if carefully choosing his words, "I was thinking of making the village our main base. I can manage the company from anywhere with internet, and here is where I found my soul again." Emily felt tears of happiness blur her vision. "Yes," she answered simply, "because sometimes a single word can contain all the love in the world." The kiss that followed was different from all the others they had shared. There was in it not just passion, but also promise, not just desire, but also destiny. Under the starry sky, with the sound of the sea as witness, two worlds that had seemed irreconcilable finally became one. "My grandmother used to say," murmured Nathan against her lips, "that true love is like the sea. It might seem dangerous at first sight, but if you trust it, it always brings you home." Emily smiled, nestling in his arms. And was she right? More than she could imagine. He kissed the top of her head. "You are my home now, Emily. You and this village, this sea, this life will build together." The wind blew, gently bringing with it the smell of sea salt and jasmine, of change and permanence, of endings and beginnings. On the horizon, the first lights of dawn began to paint the sky, promising a new day, a new chapter, a new story to be told. The weeks in San Francisco were a delicate dance between the old and the new world. Emily observed Nathan in his natural environment, endless meetings, video conferences, decisions that affected thousands of lives, and saw how he now managed to balance power with compassion, ambition with conscience. The penthouse apartment where he lived was a universe apart, with a panoramic view of the city that extended to the horizon like a sea of concrete and glass. During the first nights, Emily felt displaced among so much luxury, but Nathan had a special way of making her feel at home. "Look," he said one night, guiding her to the balcony. "The city lights are like stars fallen from the sky. Different from the stars in the village, but they also have their own beauty." That's how he did it, built bridges between their worlds, showed her that beauty could exist in different forms. And she, in turn, brought to his life a simplicity that he was discovering to be increasingly precious. The changes in the company were happening quickly. With the scandal involving Coleman still fresh in the media, most shareholders were eager for a new direction. The eco-resort project in the village became an example of a new corporate philosophy, sustainable development that respected local communities. "But it's not just about business," explained Nathan during an important shareholders' meeting. "It's about redefining what progress means, about understanding that true wealth can't be measured only in numbers on a spreadsheet." As he spoke, his eyes found Emily's, seated discreetly at the back of the auditorium. She smiled, feeling proud of the man he had become, of the man who, perhaps, had always been there waiting for the opportunity to emerge. The nights were theirs. In the privacy of the apartment, they shared dreams, fears, hopes. Emily talked about the children at school, about how she planned to use resources from the foundation to improve education in the village. Nathan shared his visions for other projects similar to the eco-resort, a silent revolution in the way his company operated. "Did you know that some of the older children are interested in marine biology?" she commented one night, nestled in his arms on the sofa. "Imagine if we could create a scholarship program, give them the chance to transform their love for the sea into a career." Nathan's eyes shone with the idea. "Why not? We can establish partnerships with universities. Create a research center at the resort. Your children could be the first of many generations of marine scientists trained right there in the village." That's how their dreams intertwined and grew, like two different plants, sharing the same fertile soil. Each brought their own roots, their own essence, but together they created something new and stronger. The news of the wedding was received with joy in the village. Ruth was already beginning preparations even from a distance, sending daily messages about details that were crucial to her: which flowers would be used, which cake recipe would be chosen, how the church would be decorated. "Mom wants a complete, traditional wedding," laughed Emily, reading another extensive message on her cell phone. "I think she's more excited than both of us combined." Nathan embraced her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "And why not? Let her plan the ceremony of her dreams. I only ask one thing." "What?" "That it be on the beach, at sunset. I want to marry you with the sea as witness, just as it was witness to our entire story." Emily turned in his arms, touching his face with affection. "When did you become so romantic, Nathan Stone?" "The moment a certain village teacher taught me that there are different types of wealth in the world." He kissed the tip of her nose. "And that the most valuable of them is the capacity to love and be loved in return." The days in San Francisco transformed into weeks, and the weeks began to pass more quickly as the wedding date approached. The transformation of the company was almost complete. New directors had been appointed, more ethical and sustainable policies were being implemented, and the eco-resort project was ready to begin its construction phase. "It's time to go back." "Home," said Nathan one morning, watching Emily drink her coffee on the balcony. "The village must be missing you." "Missing us," she gently corrected. "You're also part of that place now, you know." He smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip a beat. "Yes, I am. And that's the most surprising thing of all, how a place I planned to transform ended up completely transforming me." On their last night in San Francisco, they had a simple dinner in the apartment, homemade pasta that Emily learned to make following an old recipe from Nathan's grandmother. As they ate, they talked about the future, about the dreams they now shared. "You know what enchants me most about you?" asked Nathan, pouring more wine into their glasses. "How? You never lost your essence, even in the midst of all this whirlwind of changes." Emily smiled, thoughtful. "Perhaps because I always knew who I was. What changed was discovering that I could be more than I imagined, without ceasing to be who I always was." "And me? Who do you think I've become?" She studied him for a moment, her heart overflowing with love for the man before her. "You've become who you always were inside, Nathan. You just needed someone to remind you of that." The kiss they shared tasted of wine and promises of past and future, of two worlds that had found a way to coexist, not just in peace but in perfect harmony. The next morning, as the driver loaded the luggage into the car, Emily took one last look at the apartment. The place that initially had seemed so intimidating to her now held precious memories. But her heart beat stronger with the prospect of returning home, to the smell of sea salt, to the sound of waves, to the simplicity that had taught Nathan so much. "Ready?" he asked, extending his hand to her. "Always," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. The sun was rising over San Francisco as they departed, painting the glass buildings in shades of gold and pink. But it was another sunrise that occupied their thoughts, the one that would soon see them exchange vows of eternal love at the edge of the sea, uniting not just two hearts, but two worlds that once seemed irreconcilable. The return to the village was like plunging into a long-awaited embrace. The familiar smell of sea salt, the sounds of seagulls, the tranquil rhythm of local life, everything seemed more precious after the bustle of San Francisco. News of their arrival spread quickly, and soon Emily's parents' house was full of neighbors and friends, all eager to hear the news and participate in the wedding preparations. Nathan observed with fascination how his fiancée naturally reintegrated into that environment, as if she had never left. She laughed with the children who came running to hug her, chatted with the older ladies about the ceremony details, shared stories from the big city with curious fishermen. It was as if she were a living bridge between the two worlds, moving between them with a grace that enchanted him more and more. "See?" Ruth whispered to Nathan as they served coffee to visitors. "She hasn't changed at all. San Francisco didn't take away from her what we love most, that heart that overflows with love for this place and its people." Nathan nodded, his eyes fixed on Emily. "And that's exactly what made me change. Seeing the world through her eyes, it's like discovering a treasure that was always there, but that I was too blind to see." The preparations for the wedding transformed the village into a whirlwind of activity. All the women in the community wanted to participate, some embroidering linens for the trousseau, others preparing traditional sweets that would be served at the party, each contributing what they knew how to do best. One afternoon, while walking on the beach where the ceremony would be held, Emily and Nathan found a group of fishermen building a rustic wooden altar. "It's our contribution," explained George, with evident pride in his voice. "The wood is from an old fishing boat that sailed these waters for more than 30 years. We thought it would be good symbolism, something old being part of a new beginning." Nathan was visibly moved by the gesture. He shook George's hand firmly, words momentarily failing him. It was another sign of how the community had accepted him, of how he had truly become part of that place. The weeks preceding the wedding were filled with special moments. Nathan insisted on actively participating in the entire process, breaking protocols and expectations. He could be seen helping to set up structures on the beach, carrying chairs, offering opinions on decorations, always with a smile on his face that revealed how much he was appreciating that simplicity. "You know what I like most here?" he commented one night as they dined on the porch of Emily's parents' house. "How everything has a deeper meaning. It's not just about spending money to impress, it's about creating memories, about honoring traditions, about building something that goes beyond ourselves." Emily smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "It's funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? You came here to transform this place, but in the end, it was the place that transformed me," he completed, gently kissing her hand. "Or rather, it was you and this place together." The eve of the wedding brought with it an exciting surprise. A group of Emily's former students had prepared a special presentation, a song that spoke about the love between the sea and the land, between tradition and change. The young voices rose in the night air, carrying a message of hope and renewal that touched all present. Nathan, who was finalizing some details of the altar with the fishermen, stopped to listen. His eyes found Emily's across the distance, and in that moment both felt the weight and beauty of what they had built together. Later, alone at the lookout where so many important moments of their story had happened, they shared their last moments as engaged couple. "Tomorrow at this time," murmured Nathan, embracing her from behind as they observed the sea under the moonlight, "we'll be husband and wife." Emily nestled in his arms, feeling the strength and warmth of his body. "Are you nervous?" "Anxious," he corrected, "anxious to officially begin our life together, to see all our dreams becoming reality one by one." "And the first of them is already happening," she said, pointing to where the eco-resort structures were beginning to take shape, harmoniously integrated into the natural landscape. "Who would have thought that that first argument at the community center would bring us here?" Nathan laughed softly. "You challenged me that day. It was the first time in a long time that someone had the courage to oppose me, not out of self-interest, but for something greater." "And you surprised me," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. "It was the first time I saw beyond the relentless businessman, that I glimpsed the man you could be, the man you are now." The kiss they shared was gentle, full of promise and expectation. Tomorrow their lives would officially change. But in truth, the most important change had already happened, in their hearts in their souls, in the way they saw the world and their place in it. "I need to go," whispered Emily after a moment. "Mum will have a fit if I don't follow all the traditions, including not seeing the groom on the night before the wedding." Nathan held her for one more moment, his eyes memorizing every detail of her face under the moonlight. "Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow, when the sun sets, we'll begin our own tradition." Emily smiled, giving him one last kiss before moving away. As she descended the hill toward her house, she felt her heart so full of love and gratitude that it seemed almost impossible to contain it. In the village below, the lights began to turn on one by one, like earthly stars responding to their sisters in the sky. The sea whispered its ancient songs of love and change, and in the air hung a sweet expectation, the promise of a tomorrow where two different worlds would unite, not just in theory, but in a celebration of love, respect, and transformation. The wedding day dawned with a special clarity, as if the sky itself wanted to participate in the celebration. From the earliest hours of the morning, the entire village was in motion. Women carrying flowers and arrangements, men adjusting the final structures on the beach, children running excitedly in their festive attire. In Emily's room, the agitation was even greater. Ruth, aided by a small army of friends and neighbors, transformed her daughter into a bride who seemed to have stepped out of a seaside fairy tale. The dress, a creation that blended contemporary elegance with local artisanal touches, had been made by her own hands, with delicate laces that resembled the foam of waves. "Something old," said Ruth, fastening in Emily's hair a mother-of-pearl comb that had belonged to her grandmother. "Something new," she continued, adjusting the dress with hands trembling with emotion. "Something borrowed," added Mary, offering a delicate silver bracelet. "And something blue," completed one of the school children, presenting a garland of sea flowers dyed in soft shades of blue. Meanwhile, in his room at the inn, Nathan prepared himself with a mixture of anxiety and serenity. He had chosen a light suit, more appropriate for a seaside ceremony than the traditional black. In his hands, he nervously rotated a small velvet box that held a special surprise for Emily. The beach was transformed. The wooden altar built by the fishermen had been decorated with white flowers and ribbons that danced in the sea breeze. Simple but elegant chairs formed a natural corridor on the sand, and in the background, the sea served as the perfect setting, its calm waters reflecting the sky that was beginning to tinge with the colors of sunset. Guests from both worlds began to arrive. Executives in expensive suits mingled with fishermen in their best clothes. Elegant socialites chatted animatedly with the village ladies. It was as if, for one day, all social barriers had been dissolved by the magic of love. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the music started, not a traditional wedding march, but a local song, played by village violinists and accompanied by the choir of children from Emily's school. Nathan waited at the altar, his heart beating strongly under his light suit. When Emily appeared at the beginning of the sand corridor, on her father's arm, the world seemed to stop for a moment. She was stunning, in her dress that seemed to capture the very essence of the sea, her hair partially loose, dancing gently in the breeze, her eyes shining with love and promise. George, normally a man of few words, had tears in his eyes when he handed his daughter's hand to Nathan. "Take care of her as the sea takes care of the land," he said, his voice choked. "With respect, with constancy, with eternal love." The ceremony was a perfect fusion of traditions. Words in English and Italian blended. Ancient prayers were interspersed with modern promises. Local rituals harmonized with universal gestures of love. When the time came for the vows, Nathan surprised everyone by speaking in perfect English, without any trace of his usual formality. "Emily, you taught me that true power isn't in changing the world, but in knowing when to let the world change us. You transformed not just my life, but my soul. I promise to spend every day of the rest of our life honoring that transformation, being the man you saw in me even when I couldn't see it." Tears flowed freely down Emily's face when it was her turn. "Nathan, you arrived here like a storm but transformed into a gentle breeze that renews and vivifies. In you, I found not just love, but proof that the greatest miracles happen When we open our heart to possibilities that seem impossible, I promise to always be your safe harbor, your guiding star, your partner in all the seas we'll navigate together. It was then that Nathan opened the small velvet box he carried, revealing two unique rings, made with white gold and small fragments of local mother of pearl, thus uniting the precious and the simple, the luxurious and the natural, just as they themselves had united. These rings, he explained to the guests, were made with mother of pearl collected right here on this beach, worked by local artisans and combined with gold in a traditional San Francisco jewelry store. They are a symbol of how different worlds can unite to create something even more beautiful. When the rings were exchanged and the kiss was shared, the sun touched exactly the line of the horizon, creating a spectacle of light that seemed like a natural blessing for the union. The explosion of applause and cheers mingled with the sound of waves, creating a symphony of joy that echoed along the beach. The party that followed was a celebration of life in its purest form. Tables were arranged on the sand, loaded with a mixture of local dishes and international delicacies. Italian wine flowed freely, along with the region's artisanal whiskey. Local musicians alternated with a professional DJ, creating a soundtrack that made everyone dance, regardless of origin or social class. In a quiet moment, while they observed the celebration of their union, Nathan whispered in Emily's ear, "Look around, my love. See how everyone is happy, how everyone naturally mingles. This is how the world should always be." Emily smiled, nestling in the arms of her now husband. "And that's how it will be, at least in our little piece of the world. Each project we develop, each change we make, will be with this spirit of union, of respect, of love." The party continued into the night with stories being shared, friendships being formed, barriers being broken down. And when finally the last guest departed, Nathan and Emily remained on the beach, dancing gently under the stars, lulled by the eternal sound of the waves. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her head resting on his chest. Nathan smiled, gently, kissing her hair. "Wherever love takes us, but always with one foot on this sand, one eye on this sea, and our hearts united as today and always." And so, under the starry sky of her village by the sea, Emily and Nathan began their journey together, not just as husband and wife, but as living symbols that true love can transcend any barrier, transform any reality, and create beauty even in the most unlikely places. The months that followed the wedding brought a new routine to the village. The eco-resort was beginning to take shape, but in a way that seemed organic, as if nature itself were guiding its construction. Nathan and Emily had established their home in a seaside house, neither too luxurious nor too simple, a perfect reflection of the harmony they had found between their worlds. The transformation of the original project into something truly sustainable and integrated with the community was becoming a success story in the business world. Journalists began to appear in the village, no longer to seek scandals, but to document how a small fishing community had managed to maintain its essence while embracing progress on its own terms. "The secret," explained Nathan during an interview for an important sustainability magazine, "is understanding that real development doesn't mean erasing what exists, but rather building on solid foundations of tradition and local knowledge." Emily continued teaching at the school, now expanded and modernized thanks to resources from the foundation created by Nathan. But her influence went beyond the classroom. She had become a kind of cultural ambassador, helping to create programs that allowed resort visitors to experience local life in an authentic and respectful way. A particularly busy morning brought news that would change their lives even more. Emily woke up feeling different, with an inner certainty that made her smile before even opening her eyes. Nathan, who was already up preparing coffee in the kitchen with a view of the sea, immediately noticed something in her look when she came down the stairs. "What is it?" he asked, leaving the coffee cup on the counter and approaching her. "You look radiant." Emily took his hands, placing them on her still flat stomach. "I think we'll have to make some changes to the resort plans," she said with a mysterious smile. "Maybe add a nursery?" Nathan's eyes widened, instantly understanding. "Are you sure?" as sure as I am of the love I feel for you." The news of the pregnancy spread through the village like a sea breeze, bringing with it a wave of joy and celebration. Ruth was already starting to knit little jackets, alternating between blue and pink since the baby's sex was still a mystery. George, always more reserved, smiled more openly now, making plans to build a small wooden boat for his future grandchild. The impact of the news extended beyond the immediate family. The entire community seemed to vibrate with the prospect of a new life that would be in a way a child not just of Emily and Nathan, but of the village itself. The older women shared advice and traditional recipes for a healthy pregnancy, while the fishermen promised to teach the child all the secrets of the sea. Nathan, in turn, surprised everyone with his dedication. Between important meetings and corporate decisions, he found time to accompany Emily to every medical appointment, to research fetal development, to talk to the baby every night before bed. "Did you know he or she can already hear our voice?" he commented one night, his hand lovingly resting on the belly that was beginning to show the first signs. "I want our child to know all the stories. Mine, yours, the villages, the seas." Emily smiled, covering his hand with hers. "And they'll be stories of love, of transformation, of how two different worlds can unite and create something extraordinary." The resort continued its evolution, now with an even more special touch. Nathan had decided to incorporate an educational center dedicated to environmental and cultural preservation, which would bear the baby's name when born. The project would include a library, a space for traditional workshops, and a marine research laboratory. "I want our child to grow up understanding the importance of preserving not just nature, but also the traditions that make us who we are," he explained during a meeting with the team of architects. The pregnancy progressed along with the construction, and each milestone was celebrated by the entire community. When they discovered they were expecting a girl, the village organized a traditional seaside party, with music, dances, and blessing rituals that mixed Catholic elements with ancient local traditions. "She will be blessed by the sea and the land," declared one of the oldest ladies in the village, passing aromatic herbs over Emily's belly in a protection ritual. "She'll have the strength of the waves and the wisdom of the ancestors." Nathan observed these ceremonies with a deep respect, recognizing in them a beauty and meaning that had previously escaped him. Each day brought new discoveries, not just about the approaching parenthood, but about the infinite ways tradition and modernity could intertwine and enrich each other. One afternoon, as they walked along the beach during sunset, a ritual they had maintained since the first days of their relationship, Emily suddenly stopped, bringing her hand to her belly. "She's kicking," she said, taking Nathan's hand and placing it on the exact spot. "Feel it. It's like she's dancing with the waves." Nathan remained silent for a moment, marveling at the movement beneath his fingers. When he spoke, his voice was choked with emotion. "She already knows the rhythm of the sea. She already knows she belongs to this place, just as we learned to belong." "And what better place to grow up?" replied Emily, looking around. The eco-resort was almost ready, its structures harmoniously integrated into the natural landscape. The old houses in the village had been restored, maintaining their original charm while gaining structural improvements. The pier had been renovated, allowing the fishermen to work with more safety and comfort. "Our baby will have the best of both worlds," she continued. "She can study at the best schools, but will also learn the secrets of the sea from the fishermen. She'll have access to modern technology and knowledge, but will also know the value of traditions and simplicity." Nathan embraced her from behind, his hands resting protectively on her belly as they watched the sun sink below the horizon. "And above all, she'll know the story of how her parents discovered that true progress isn't in destroying the old to build the new, but in finding ways to make both flourish together." The wind blew gently, bringing with it the smell of sea, salt and the promise of a future where different worlds could not just coexist, but create something even more beautiful in their union. In Emily's womb, their daughter moved as if dancing to the sound of the waves, already part of that story of love, transformation, and renewal that had begun in an afternoon of confrontation and was transforming into a legacy of harmony and hope. The final months of pregnancy brought a special serenity to the village. The eco-resort was practically completed, its sustainable structures harmoniously integrated into the natural landscape as if they had always been there. The first guests would begin to arrive soon, but before that, there was an even more important event to celebrate. Marina, a name chosen in honor of the sea that had been the silent witness to their entire love story, was born on a full moon night, with the sound of waves as her first lullaby. The birth took place at the nearest hospital, but as soon as possible, Emily and Nathan brought their little jewel home. The entire village stopped to celebrate the arrival of the girl. A spontaneous procession formed, with fishermen and their families walking to the seaside house, bringing simple but meaningful gifts, small protection amulets, handmade clothes, stories and blessings passed down through generations. "She has your eyes," whispered Nathan, watching his daughter sleeping in the artisanal cradle that George had made especially for his granddaughter. "But the smile? The smile is just like yours." Emily smiled, leaning back against her husband's chest, as they observed their little miracle. "And she has a little of everyone who helped us get here. The strength of the sea, the wisdom of the land, the beauty of the union between different worlds." Marina's first months were a period of adaptation and discoveries. Nathan surprised everyone with his paternal dedication. Between important video conferences and corporate decisions, he found time to change diapers, give bottles, and sing old Italian lullabies that his grandmother had taught him. The eco-resort finally opened its doors, and the success was immediate. Visitors were enchanted not just with the sustainable facilities and the natural beauty of the place, but mainly with the authenticity of the experiences offered. Local fishermen became guides, sharing ancestral knowledge about the sea. Village. Artisans offered workshops on traditional handicrafts. The local culture wasn't a tourist attraction, but a living and transformative experience. "See," said Emily one afternoon as she nursed Marina on the house porch, watching a group of tourists learning to mend fishing nets with the older fishermen. "How it's possible to preserve the old while we build the new." Nathan, who was beside her, reviewing some documents, raised his eyes to contemplate the scene. "It's like our family," he replied, gently caressing his daughter's head. "A perfect mixture of tradition and innovation, of simplicity and sophistication." The educational center of the resort, named Marina Center in honor of the little one who had inspired its creation, became a hub for research and environmental preservation. Scientists from around the world came to study the local ecosystem, always in partnership with the fishermen who knew those waters like the palm of their hands. Marina grew amid all this movement, absorbing the best of both worlds. Her first steps were taken on the beach sand. Her first words were an enchanting mixture of English and Italian. She was adored by everyone in the village, a little princess who carried within herself the promise of a future where different cultures and worldviews could coexist in harmony. One afternoon, when Marina had just turned 1-year-old, the whole family gathered at the lookout for a small private celebration. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, while the little one played with seashells in the sand, under the watchful eye of her parents and grandparents. "Sometimes I still wonder," said Nathan, embracing Emily from behind as they watched their daughter, "how I got so lucky, how that arrogant man who arrived here determined to destroy everything could transform so much." Emily turned in his arms, touching his face with affection. "It wasn't luck, my love, it was courage. Courage to admit you might be wrong, to open your heart to new possibilities, to allow love to transform not just your plans, but your very essence." George, who was nearby playing with his granddaughter, added his own wisdom to the conversation. "The sea teaches us that the greatest changes happen gradually, wave after wave. So it was with you, Nathan. So it is with our village. So it will be with Marina." Ruth, who observed the scene with tears of happiness in her eyes, completed, "And so it will continue to be, because now it's not just two families that have united, but two worlds that have learned to dance together." Marina let out a crystalline laugh, drawing everyone's attention. She had found a starfish in the sand and raised it triumphantly, her eyes shining with the same intensity as the setting sun. In that moment, she was the perfect personification of everything her parents had fought to build. A future where tradition and progress, simplicity and sophistication, sea and land, could not only coexist, but create something extraordinarily beautiful in their union. "To Marina," proposed Nathan, raising a glass of local wine that the fisherman had brought specially for the occasion. "To the future she represents." "To love," added Emily, her eyes meeting her husband's with the same intensity as on the first day. "That continues to be the most powerful force of transformation." "To the village," completed George. "That taught us that the deepest roots are those that allow trees to grow taller." And so, under the sky that was filling with stars, that family born of the improbable celebrated not just 1 year of Marina, but the entire path traveled. A path that had begun with confrontation and resistance, but had blossomed into love, understanding, and a vision of the future where different worlds could meet and create something even more beautiful in their diversity. The years passed like gentle waves on the beach, each bringing new joys and discoveries. Marina grew like a wildflower by the sea, free and strong, carrying within herself the natural grace of her mother and the gentle determination that her father had learned to cultivate. At 5 years old, she was already known throughout the village as a small force of nature, as comfortable in the resort's meeting rooms as in the fishermen's boats. The eco-resort had become a model of sustainable development, studied and replicated in other coastal communities around the world. Nathan and Emily were frequently invited to share their story at international conferences, but they always made a point of bringing representatives of the local community with them. The transformation, after all, had been a collective effort. "True luxury," Nathan used to say in his presentations, "isn't in imposing our vision on the world, but in learning to see through other eyes, in understanding that real progress means growing together, preserving what is most valuable in each culture." Emily continued teaching, now in a much larger and better equipped school, but that maintained the same welcoming essence as before. Her classes had become famous for integrating traditional knowledge with modern education, attracting educators from all over the country interested in her unique method. A particularly significant morning brought a surprise that nobody expected. Marina, who had just turned 5, came running into the kitchen during breakfast, her eyes shining with the intensity that always announced a new discovery. "Dad, Mum, come see," she exclaimed, pulling them by the hand toward the beach. There, on the still wet sand from the low tide, she had organized a small exhibition of shells and starfish, each carefully identified with words written in English and Italian in childish but determined handwriting. "I want to open a school," she announced with the seriousness that only a 5-year-old can have, "to teach people about the sea, like Grandpa teaches me." Nathan and Emily exchanged moved glances, recognizing in their daughter the same spirit of union and preservation that had transformed their own lives. Marina had naturally absorbed the best of both worlds, transforming it into something entirely new and full of possibilities. "And you know what else?" continued the little one, her dark eyes so similar to her mother's shining with enthusiasm. "I want it to be here at the resort, but also in the village, so that everyone can learn, the tourists and the children from here." That innocent idea ended up transforming into a new project, the Little Sea Guardians program, an educational initiative that united local children and visitors in activities of environmental and cultural preservation. Marina, without knowing it, had created yet another bridge between the different worlds that her parents worked so hard to harmonize. The success of the program was immediate and moving. Seeing children of different social and cultural backgrounds learning together about the sea, sharing knowledge and creating bonds of friendship, was living proof that the dream of true integration was possible. "Our daughter," commented Nathan one night, watching Marina sleep after a particularly busy day of activities with her group of little guardians, "she's living proof that we made the right choice, isn't she? That love and respect can truly transform the world." Emily smiled, nestling in her husband's arms. "She's more than that. She's the promise of a future where there are no barriers between different worlds, where tradition and progress dance together naturally as she does. The eco-resort continued to grow, but in an organic and respectful way. Each new program was thought out together with the community, always seeking the perfect balance between development and preservation. The Marina Center had become an internationally recognized research hub, attracting scientists and scholars interested in understanding how sustainable development and cultural preservation could walk together. One afternoon, while the whole family was gathered at the lookout, their special place since the beginning of their story, Marina asked a question that deeply touched everyone's heart. "Dad, why did you want to destroy the cemetery before?" The silence that followed was heavy, but Nathan had learned long ago that honesty was the only possible path. He sat on the sand, placing his daughter on his lap, and began to tell his story. Not the simplified version she already knew, but the complete truth about how love had transformed not just his plans, but his very essence. "Before I met your mother," he explained, "I thought success meant building big things, no matter the cost. But she taught me that the most important constructions are those we make in people's hearts, in the bonds we create, in the traditions we preserve." Marina listened attentively, her eyes alternating between her father and the vastness of the sea, as if trying to comprehend the depth of that transformation. When he finished, she remained silent for a moment before declaring with the surprising wisdom that sometimes only children possess. "So love changed everything, right? Like the sea changes the beach every day, but always leaving it more beautiful." Emily, who observed the scene with tears in her eyes, embraced them both. "Exactly like that, my love. Love is like the sea, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always capable of transforming everything it touches." And there, under the sky that was beginning to fill with stars, that family born of the improbable celebrated not just their love, but the living proof that the greatest changes begin in the heart. Marina was more than their daughter. She was the symbol of a new way of seeing the world, where different cultures, traditions, and visions could meet and create something extraordinarily beautiful in their diversity. The 10th anniversary of the eco-resort coincided with an exciting discovery in the village waters. A group of researchers from the Marina Center, working together with local fishermen, had identified a new species of coral in an area near the coast. The discovery not only put the village on the international scientific map, but also reinforced the importance of environmental preservation and traditional knowledge. Marina, now 10 years old, was at the center of all the excitement. Her passion for the sea and science had grown with her, and it wasn't rare to find her in the research center's laboratory, absorbing every detail of the scientists' explanations, or on the boats with the fishermen, learning the ancestral secrets of the waters. "She has the best of both worlds," commented George one afternoon, watching his granddaughter help catalogue the coral samples, the scientific curiosity of her father, and the deep connection with the sea of her mother. Nathan, who was nearby supervising the installation of new research equipment, smiled with pride. "And the wisdom of her grandparents, don't forget. It was you who first noticed something different in that reef area." It was true. The discovery of the new coral had begun with a casual observation by George during one of his routine fishing trips. His intimate knowledge of the sea, passed down through generations, had proven as valuable as the most sophisticated equipment at the research center. The celebration of the resort's anniversary transformed into an even bigger event, bringing together scientists, environmentalists, business people, and of course the entire local community. It was a perfect opportunity to show the world how sustainable development and cultural preservation could walk together. Emily, who now divided her time between teaching and coordinating the resort's educational programs, had prepared a special presentation with her students, a play that told the story of the village from the first fisherman to the discovery of the new coral, blending traditional elements with scientific information. "I remember the day when it all began," she said during her opening speech for the celebrations. "When an Italian businessman arrived here with plans to transform our village into something completely different, but fate, or perhaps the sea itself, had other plans. Nathan, seated in the front row with Marina by his side, felt his heart tighten with the memory. How blind he had been back then, unable to see the true wealth he was about to destroy. The transformation he had undergone was as profound as that of the village itself. "Dad," whispered Marina, pulling his sleeve, "tell me again how you and Mom fell in love." It was a story she already knew by heart, but never tired of hearing. Nathan smiled, pulling his daughter closer. "It was the sea that united us," he began, using the words that had become almost a ritual between them. "The same sea that I wanted to tame, but that ended up teaching me the most important of lessons." "That true power is in knowing when to change," completed Marina, her eyes shining with the precocious wisdom that so impressed everyone. The celebration extended for 3 days, blending scientific activities with traditional festivities. Researchers presented their studies in the morning, while in the afternoon the fishermen conducted demonstrations of ancestral techniques of navigation and fishing. At night, music and dance united everyone in a celebration that transcended cultural and social barriers. During one of those nights, while watching her daughter dance with a group of local children and tourists' children, Emily felt Nathan's arms embrace her waist from behind. "Sometimes I still wonder," he murmured in her ear, "if all this is real. If we really managed to create something so beautiful from such a turbulent beginning." Emily turned in his arms, touching his face with affection. "It's real because we chose to make it real. Because we learned that true love isn't about changing the other, but about growing together." The moment was interrupted by Marina, who came running to them with exciting news. "Mom, Dad, the scientists said they're going to give my name to the new coral. They're going to call it Corallium marinae." The news caught everyone by surprise. It was a rare honor, usually reserved for veteran researchers or major contributors to marine science. But the scientists had been unanimous in their decision. The coral would be named in honor of the young girl who represented the perfect union between scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom. "It's more than appropriate," declared the leader of the research team during the official announcement. "This coral, like Marina, is a symbol of how different worlds can unite and create something extraordinarily beautiful and unique." That night, after the celebrations ended and Marina finally fell asleep, still murmuring the scientific name of her coral, Nathan and Emily walked to the lookout, their special place since the beginning of their story. 10 years, reflected, Nathan observing the lights of the resort, softly reflecting in the calm waters of the bay. 10 years since we decided to change everything. "And look at what we've built," replied Emily, intertwining her fingers with his. "Not just a resort or a research center, but a new way of seeing the world. A new way of loving too," he added, pulling her closer. "You taught me that true love is like the sea, deep, sometimes mysterious, but always capable of surprising us with its beauty." The wind blew gently, bringing with it the familiar smell of sea salt and the distant sound of waves. In the village, below, the lights began to go out one by one, but the resort remained softly illuminated, a beacon of hope and transformation. "What do you think the next 10 years hold for us?" asked Emily, leaning against her husband's chest. Nathan smiled, gently kissing her hair. "I don't know for sure, but I'm certain of one thing. As long as we have each other, Marina, this village and this sea, any future will be extraordinary." And so, under the starry sky that had witnessed the beginning of their love story, they silently renewed their commitment, not just to each other, but to the dream they had built together. A dream that proved, day after day, that true love has the power to transform not just hearts, but entire worlds. The news filled the entire family with pride. The youth research program was extremely selective, and Marina had been chosen not just for her scientific knowledge, but also for her singular ability to integrate traditional wisdom with modern methodology. "It's as if the circle is closing," commented Nathan later that night as he and Emily walked along the beach under the moonlight. "Our daughter is fulfilling the dream we didn't even know we had when everything began." Emily smiled, squeezing her husband's hand. "She's living proof that we made the right choice, that love and respect can truly transform the world." The eco-resort had become much more than a tourist enterprise. it was now an educational and scientific complex that attracted researchers, environmentalists, and scholars from around the world. The Millionaire Center, in particular, had transformed into an international reference in marine research and sustainable development. The discovery of the coral that bore Millionaire's name had been just the beginning. In the following years, the collaboration between scientists and local fishermen resulted in several other important discoveries, all documenting the rich biodiversity of the region and the importance of preserving it. Nathan, who had once dreamed of covering that coast with concrete and glass, was now one of the most respected spokespersons for sustainable development in the hotel sector. His lectures and workshops attracted business people from around the world, interested in learning how to reconcile economic progress with environmental and cultural preservation. True luxury, he always said in his presentations, isn't in imposing our vision on the world, but in learning to see through other eyes, in understanding that real progress means growing together, preserving what is most valuable in each culture. Emily continued her work in education, now directing an innovative program that integrated traditional knowledge into the school curriculum. Her methodologies had been adopted by schools throughout the country, proving that it was possible to prepare new generations for the future without losing the connection to their roots. The village prospered, but in a way that preserved its essence. The old houses had been restored, not replaced. The traditional pier had been modernized, but maintained its original charm. The fishermen still went out every morning in their boats, now equipped with technology that made their work safer and more efficient. Marina grew as a living symbol of this harmony between the old and the new. Her mornings were dedicated to scientific studies in the resort's laboratory, but her afternoons frequently found her in the boats with George, learning the secrets of the sea that no book could teach. "Grandpa," she asked one afternoon while helping to collect the nets, "what was the village like before the resort, before my parents met?" George smiled, his eyes turned to the horizon as if he could see the past reflected in the waters. "It was simpler, quieter, but also harder. We didn't have many opportunities besides fishing. Your parents brought us progress, but of the good kind, the kind that doesn't destroy but strengthens what already exists." Marina's question triggered a special project. With the help of Ruth and other village ladies, she began to collect old stories from the community, recording testimonials, and digitizing old photographs. The project, which began as a personal curiosity, soon transformed into a digital archive that documented the transformation of the village. "It's important to preserve these memories," she explained during a presentation of the project at the Millionaire Center. "They show us where we came from and help us understand where we're going." The success of the digital archive inspired a new wing at the research center, dedicated to oral history and traditional knowledge of the community. It was another way to ensure that progress didn't mean forgetting the past. It was during the inauguration of this new wing that something unexpected happened. Vittorio Coleman, the former financial director, who had tried to bribe Emily so many years ago, appeared in the village. He was older, humbler, and came with a specific purpose. "Came to ask forgiveness," he said, his voice laden with sincere emotion. "And also to thank you. What you've built here is extraordinary. It's the future we didn't know how to see back then." The moment of reconciliation was touching. Nathan, who had carried a certain bitterness toward his former colleague for years, was the first to extend his hand. "The important thing is that now you see, and you're here to witness that true change is possible." Coleman's visit brought a wave of reflection for everyone. During dinner that night, gathered on the house porch with a view of the sea, the family shared thoughts about how their lives had changed. "I remember the day I first saw your father," Emily told Marina, who listened attentively. "He seemed so different from the man he is today, but even back then there was something in him, a possibility of transformation that just needed the right chance to flourish." Nathan took his wife's hand, kissing it gently. "And you gave me that chance. Not just a chance to change my plans, but to change my soul." Marina watched her parents with a smile. At 15, she deeply understood the meaning of that love and transformation story. "That's why I decided to study oceanography," she revealed. "I want to continue the work you started. Show the world that it's possible to develop without destroying, to progress without forgetting who we are. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reflected in the calm waters of the bay. The eco-resort, harmoniously integrated into the landscape, gleamed softly in the evening light. On the beach, fishermen collected their nets, while tourists participated in a class on environmental preservation. "You know what your grandmother would say if she could see all this?" asked Nathan, his eyes misty with the memory of his grandmother. "What, Dad?" "That sometimes we need to lose our way to find our destiny, and that love, when true, has the power to transform not just hearts, but entire worlds." Emily embraced her husband and daughter, her heart overflowing with gratitude. 15 years had passed since that first afternoon of confrontation, and each day had been a confirmation that the greatest changes begin with a single act of love and courage. The wind blew gently, bringing with it the smell of sea salt and the promise of many other stories yet to come. In the village that had learned to embrace the future without losing its essence, a new generation grew understanding that true progress wasn't in choosing between tradition and innovation, but in finding ways to make them dance together, like the sea and the land, like the sun and the moon, like two hearts that one day met and decided to change the world. The future arrived like a gentle wave on the beach, bringing new promises and challenges with it. Marina, now with a degree in oceanography and a master's in environmental management, had assumed the scientific direction of the Marina Center, transforming it into one of the most important marine research hubs in the Southern Hemisphere. Her work combining scientific knowledge with traditional wisdom had revolutionized how coastal communities around the world approached environmental preservation. Nathan and Emily watched with pride as their daughter conducted an international conference on sustainable development held at the eco-resort itself. Cat 25 Marina was the perfect embodiment of the dream they had dared to dream 2 decades ago. "She has your strength," whispered Nathan to Emily as they watched the presentation, "and your heart." Emily smiled, squeezing her husband's hand. The years had been kind to them, adding only a few silver strands to their hair and expression lines that spoke of shared smiles and moments of happiness. The eco-resort had become a global model of sustainable tourism, inspiring similar projects in dozens of countries. But more important than its commercial success was the impact it had on the village and its people. The community prospered, keeping its traditions alive while embracing new opportunities. "I remember the day it all began," reflected George, now a white-haired gentleman, but still active in his role as consultant to the Marine Research Program. "When that businessman arrived here with his grand plans, who would have thought that initial confrontation would transform into such a beautiful story?" The love story of Nathan and Emily had become a kind of local legend, told and retold as an example of how true love can transform not just hearts, but entire communities. Their lives were living testimony that progress and tradition could not only coexist, but create something extraordinarily beautiful in their union. During the conference, Marina presented a new project she had developed, an international network of coastal communities committed to sustainable development and cultural preservation. The project, named Waves of Change, was a natural expansion of the pioneering work her parents had initiated. "I learned from my parents," she explained during her presentation, "that true transformation begins in the heart, that we don't need to choose between progress and preservation, between innovation and tradition. We can and must find ways to make these apparent opposites dance together in harmony." Nathan and Emily exchanged glances, their hearts overflowing with pride and emotion. Their love story had generated much more than a daughter. It had created a legacy of transformation and hope that would continue far beyond them. That night, after the conference, the whole family gathered at the lookout, their special place. Since the beginning, the full moon bathed the bay in silvery light, and the eco-resort's lights shone softly, perfectly integrated with the natural landscape. "You know what impresses me most?" said Marina, seated between her parents. "How a love story can change the world, how two hearts that meet can create waves that spread far beyond themselves." Nathan embraced his wife and daughter, his heart full of gratitude. "Love is the most powerful transformative force that exists," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Your mother taught me that, and together we tried to pass that lesson forward." Emily smiled, recalling that first afternoon of confrontation that had changed their lives forever. "And you learned the lesson well, my love. Transformed not just your plans, but your very essence." The fee. Wind blew gently, bringing with it the familiar smell of sea salt and the promise of many more stories yet to come. In the village below, lights began to turn on one by one, like earthly stars responding to their sisters in the sky. Marina stood up, her eyes shining with the same determination her parents recognized in themselves. "I think that's what true love means," she said. "It's not just about two people finding happiness together, but about creating something greater than themselves. Something that continues growing and transforming lives long after the initial story ends." Nathan and Emily observed their daughter with infinite pride and love. She was more than their heir. She was living proof that true love has the power to transcend generations, to create changes that echo through time like waves in an endless ocean. And so, under the starry sky that had witnessed the beginning of their story, 3 generations celebrated not just a love that had transformed their lives, but a legacy of hope and transformation that would continue to inspire hearts and change worlds for many generations to come. The sea whispered its ancient songs of love and change, and in the air hung the certainty that some stories never truly end. They simply transform, like waves eternally kissing the shore, into new beginnings, new dreams, new loves. The years continued to flow like the tides, bringing with them new challenges and triumphs. As Marina approached her 30th birthday, the eco-resort had become more than just a model for sustainable tourism. It was now a living laboratory for climate adaptation strategies that coastal communities around the world studied and implemented. Nathan, now with distinguished silver at his temples, had stepped back from the daily management of his corporation, focusing instead on mentoring young entrepreneurs interested in sustainable development. His transformation from ruthless developer to environmental advocate had made him a sought-after speaker at business schools and environmental conferences alike. "The greatest profit," he often told his audiences, "comes not from extracting value, but from creating it. Not from changing landscapes, but from enhancing them." Emily had expanded her educational initiatives beyond the village, developing a curriculum that blended traditional ecological knowledge with modern science. Schools across the country had adopted her approach, creating a new generation of students who understood that progress didn't require abandoning the wisdom of the past. One crisp autumn morning, as the family gathered for breakfast on the seaside porch of the home Nathan and Emily had shared for over 2 decades, Marina arrived with unexpected news. "The United Nations Environmental Program has asked me to lead a global initiative," she announced, her eyes shining with the same passion that had always characterized her. "They want to replicate what we've done here in threatened coastal communities around the world." The pride in Nathan's eyes was unmistakable. "Just like your mother, always thinking beyond horizons," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze Emily's hand. The apple certainly didn't fall far from the tree. "Actually," Marina continued, a hint of nervousness entering her voice, "there's more news." She took a deep breath. "Alex has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." Alex Peterson was a marine biologist who had come to the research center 3 years earlier. Like Marina, he represented a perfect blend of scientific rigor and environmental passion. The two had worked closely on several research projects before their professional relationship blossomed into something deeper. "We want to have the ceremony here," Marina continued, "on the same beach where you two were married, and we want to time it with the completion of the new wing of the research center." Emily rose from her chair to embrace her daughter. "Nothing could be more perfect," she whispered, tears of joy forming in her eyes. The wedding preparations brought a renewed energy to the village. Just as they had for Nathan and Emily's wedding, the community rallied together, each person contributing their unique skills and knowledge. The women created handmade decorations from sustainable materials. The fishermen prepared their boats for a special maritime procession, and the children practiced songs that celebrated both the union of two people and the harmony between humans and nature. On the morning of the wedding, Nathan found himself alone at the lookout point, watching the sun rise over the ocean. The landscape before him had changed significantly from that first day he arrived in the village with grand plans of transformation. The eco-resort nestled harmoniously into the coastline, its structures designed to enhance rather than dominate the natural beauty. The research center, with its newly completed climate adaptation wing, stood as a beacon of hope and innovation. The village itself had grown, but maintained its essential character, a community bound together by respect for both tradition and progress. "I thought I might find you here," came Emily's voice from behind him. After all these years, her presence still sent a wave of warmth through his heart. "Just reflecting," he replied as she joined him at the railing, "on how differently everything turned out from what I'd planned." Emily slipped her hand into his, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. "Are you disappointed?" she asked with a knowing smile. Nathan laughed, the sound carrying across the morning air. "Only that I was so blind for so long. Think of all the beauty I might have missed if you hadn't had the courage to stand up to me that night. You would have found your way eventually," she said. "Your grandmother's wisdom was already inside you. It just needed the right moment to bloom." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the village awaken below them. In a few hours, these same sands would witness another union, another promise of shared futures and transformed lives. "Do you know what Marina told me yesterday?" Emily said. "She said that our story, yours and mine, gave her courage. Courage to believe that people can change, that seemingly opposing forces can find harmony, that love really can transform the world." Nathan pulled his wife close, overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey they had shared. "And she's living proof of that transformation," he said softly. The wedding celebration was everything Marina and Alex had hoped for, a perfect blend of time-honored traditions and innovative touches that reflected their vision for the future. The ceremony took place at sunset, just as Nathan and Emily's had, with the ocean providing a magnificent backdrop. Marina wore a dress that Ruth had helped design, incorporating elements from Emily's wedding gown, along with sustainable materials developed at the research center. As vows were exchanged and rings were placed on fingers, Nathan and Emily sat, hand in hand, witnessing the continuation of the legacy they had begun. The village elder who conducted the ceremony spoke of cycles, of tides and moons, of generations and renewal, of how true love creates ripples that extend far beyond two individuals. During the reception that followed, beneath strings of solar-powered lights that twinkled like earthbound stars, Nathan found himself in conversation with Alex's father, a businessman from the Midwest who had initially been skeptical of his son's career path. "I didn't understand at first," the older man confessed. "I wanted Alex to join the family business, not chase dreams at some coastal research center. But seeing all this," he gestured to the celebration around them, the harmonious blend of community and progress, of joy and purpose. "I get it. Now he's part of building something that matters." "That's exactly what I didn't understand when I first came here," Nathan replied, sharing the wisdom of his own journey. "Real value isn't just measured in dollars on a balance sheet. It's measured in lives improved, in environments protected, in traditions honored even as we innovate." As the night deepened and the celebration continued, Nathan and Emily slipped away to walk along the shoreline. The moon cast a silver path across the water, a road of light extending to the horizon. "Do you remember what you told me the night you proposed?" Emily asked, her voice soft against the rhythm of the waves. "That true love is like the sea," Nathan recalled. "It might seem dangerous at first sight, but if you trust it, it always brings you home." "And it has," she said, stopping to face him. "Through all these years, through challenges and celebrations, through changes we could never have imagined, it always brought us home to each other." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, still marveling at how this woman had transformed his life with her courage and vision. And now Marina and Alex begin their own journey. With foundations we helped build, Emily added, just as our children or grandchildren might someday stand on the foundations they create. They looked back, toward the celebration, where Marina and Alex were dancing beneath the stars, surrounded by a community that had become family. The research center glowed softly in the distance, a testament to what human ingenuity could accomplish when guided by respect for both innovation and tradition. I used to think my legacy would be buildings, Nathan said reflectively. Structures, of glass and steel that would bear my name long after I was gone. And instead, Emily prompted, instead it's this. He gestured encompassingly. A way of living in harmony with nature and each other, a model that's being replicated around the world, a daughter who carries forward the best of both of us while adding her own unique vision. And most importantly, he turned to face his wife fully, a love story that proves transformation is always possible when hearts are open to it. As they rejoined the celebration, Nathan thought about how the most profound changes often begin with a single moment of courage, the courage to stand up for what's right, the courage to admit when you're wrong, the courage to believe that love can truly transform not just two lives, but an entire world. And in the gentle rhythm of the waves caressing the shore, in the laughter of the community celebrating a new union, in the promise of generations yet to come who would continue this legacy of harmony between progress and tradition, there echoed the timeless truth that had changed everything, that when we allow love to guide our choices, even the most unlikely beginnings can transform into stories of extraordinary beauty and lasting impact.